try to change me in any way. You don't own me. Don't tie me down, 'cause I never stay.
I would now like to tell you a little bit about our presenter, a distinguished scholar and educator, Dr. Corey Floyd. Dr. Floyd is a professor of communication at the University of Arizona. He has spent nearly 2 decades exploring how pro-social communication, such as the expression of affection, benefits physical and mental health, and how the stability of close relationships and communication of affection in close relationships, and the effects of stress and physiological functioning. He has been the editor of 2 communication journals, received numerous awards from the National Communication Association, as well as early career achievement awards for relationship research. Finally, he has written 15 books and over 100 scientific papers, as well as book chapters on the topics of affection, emotion, family communication, nonverbal communication, and health. One of his recent books that you all may be familiar with is The Loneliness Cure. This examines the problems of affection deprivation and identifies strategies for increasing your affection and intimacy in close relationships. Today, he will be speaking about the importance of being pro-social. This couldn't come from an expert at a better time, as our use of technology is inexhaustible and only keeps emerging. Some of us say it could be diminishing our sense of human connection. Please give a great big warm welcome to Dr. Corey Floyd.
Thank you. I want to see how many of you can relate to the following story. So when I was your age, when I was a brand new freshman in college, 18 years old, enrolling at the university for the first time, I had a tough go of it my first semester. So I'm away from home, away from my friends, away from my family, around a bunch of people I didn't know. And the university seemed very big and confusing, and I couldn't figure out where my classes were, and I couldn't figure out what was expected of me in terms of assignments and grading. And I was surrounded by people, and yet I felt like I didn't really have any kind of connection to any of them. And that first semester was tough. I had a tough time sleeping. I lost quite a bit of weight. It seemed like I was always sick. And one could easily say that, well, that's just a period of adjustment that everybody goes through when they do something new in their life. You know, never been to college before, you don't know what it's about. You're going through a normal period of adjusting to that newness. But I think what was also really happening is that I was very lonely. And it seemed weird to say that because I was surrounded by people all of the time. And maybe you've had that experience too, where you're sitting in a big group, you're constantly around others, and yet you feel like you just don't have a connection with anybody, right? I have nobody to talk to, I have nobody to sit next to at lunch or go out to a movie with, or even just to hang out with and feel like I'm not alone. And I know that I'm not alone in having this experience. Probably many of you, and I see some of your heads are nodding, when you were new to college, or maybe you moved to a new town the first time and you didn't know anybody. There's a feeling of loneliness that comes with that. I've spent a lot of my career thinking about loneliness and thinking about not just what it is and why we experience it, but why it's a problem for us. And so part of what I'm going to do with our time together today is to talk about that as a problem, as something that we deal with. It's not an uncommon problem by any means. But you know that when you feel lonely, there are certain kinds of experiences that go with that make it the sort of sensation that you want to get past, that you want to get over. And a big question that often comes about when we think about loneliness and social disconnection is your smartphone to blame? Is that why you had to put it in that little baggie and give it a rest for a few minutes? Is that why you're feeling lonely? Is it social media? Is it Siri's fault that you don't have anybody to talk to? Well, we're going to talk about those questions today. What I'd like to do with our time together is start just by talking about what loneliness is. That may seem like a strange question because probably it's one of those experiences that we all understand. We know when we feel it, even if it's tough to define. Even I can't really put it into words what it means, but I know it when I'm experiencing it. We're going to talk about what it is and why it's a problem for us as human beings. We're then going to tackle that question of, is your technology to blame? Are you becoming more lonely? Are we becoming more lonely as a culture, as a society of people, because we can so quickly whip out our cell phone or go online or be involved in social media? Is that the cause of our problems? And you may or may not be surprised by my answer to that today. We're going to end with just some suggestions, I think, for what we can do when we feel lonely and in what ways our technology can actually be a help to us rather than a hindrance. So let's start with our question of what loneliness is. And I'd like to actually begin with an observation that may strike you as very self-evident, right? Not the kind of thing that we necessarily have to spell out and talk about. And that is the observation that we as human beings are profoundly social. When you think about many of our cousins in the animal kingdom, right, many other species that we inhabit this planet with, what's true of many of them is that they have evolved in such a way as once they are weaned from their mothers, they live pretty much the rest of their lives in relative solitude, right? That's true of many species. And once they're self-sufficient, once they've been raised and taught by their mothers, they kind of go off and live their life. And they'll come together when it's necessary to mate or when it's necessary to defend their territory. But they really have evolved to live their lives in relative isolation, in relative solitude. We as human beings are in sharp contrast to that. I don't think it's an exaggeration for us to say that as humans, social connection, emotional connection to other people isn't just a preference, it really, truly rises to the level of a need. In social psychology, we refer to this as the need to belong. And we call it a need very specifically, for very specific purposes, to put it alongside of other very fundamental human needs that we have. And we don't have very many. But there are certain things that we as humans have to do in order to survive and thrive, right? We have to eat. We have to sleep. We have to drink water or vodka. Whatever the case may be. We have to breathe air. We have certain things that we have to do as human beings in order to thrive, or in some cases in order even to survive. And many researchers these days put the need to connect with other human beings on that very same list as one of those things that it's not just a preference, it's not just something that we enjoy in our lives. It actually really does rise to the level of a need. And one of the indicators of that is that nature has built into us automatic kind of reminders or warning signals when we're ignoring our fundamental human needs. So if we don't eat, we feel hungry. And that's a motivator. It's a reminder, oh, hey, it's time for me to eat lunch. I need to get some nourishment in me. Or if we don't sleep, we feel fatigued, and that's our motivator. Feel thirsty when we need to drink. And as humans, what nature has given us as a motivator to meet our need to belong, our need for social connection, is the sensation that we refer to as loneliness. That's our motivator, like hunger or fatigue or thirst, to pay attention to this need that we have, and an indicator that we're not paying attention to it sufficiently. I said before that loneliness is one of those experiences that you probably can recognize it when you feel it, but it may not necessarily be easy to put into words what it actually is. So this is how I would define it. It's that sensation that occurs in us. It's partly psychological, it's partly emotional, it's actually also partly physical, that happens to us when our desired level of emotional connection isn't met, isn't achieved. And I talk about emotional connection here specifically, again, because of the observation I made a few minutes ago, which is that loneliness isn't just about aloneness, right? You've probably had the experience of being surrounded by other people and yet still feeling lonely, right? And by the same token, just because you are alone doesn't necessarily mean that you feel lonely. Those are two separate experiences. So it's not about just proximity to other people. When I was a college freshman, there were people around me all the time, and yet I still felt very lonely. I still felt very socially disconnected. So it's about what happens to us emotionally in terms of our connection to other people that really matters. And that's not to say that we all need the same level of emotional or social connection to others. We don't. We vary on that. Right? Just because, and just in the same way that we don't all need the same amount of sleep, or we don't all need the same amount of food, but we all need some, right? And even if we vary, even if you can get away with 3 hours a night of sleep, whereas I need 9, right? None of us need 0. And that's the same, this is the same for our emotional connection. None of us needs 0 social connection. So loneliness is that built-in motivator. It's what we feel when we have neglected that need, either intentionally or because we simply find ourselves in that place in life where the kinds of emotional connections that we want aren't available to us. So again, a very common experience when you start college, when you move to a new town, even when you move to a new apartment building and you don't know anybody there. Now, an important distinction about loneliness has to do with how chronic it is. We all feel lonely from time to time. What we might think of as episodic loneliness can happen in those instances when, I'm new to a place and I just haven't been able to meet anybody yet. I've just joined this club, I've just joined this gym, I've just joined this church, whatever it might be. And within that particular context, I feel lonely right now. We all experience loneliness from time to time. And episodic loneliness isn't necessarily bad, right? It can be a really good motivator to make social connections, to exert the energy it takes to walk up and introduce yourself to somebody, or to place yourself in a context where social connection and emotional connection can grow. Loneliness becomes a problem when it becomes chronic, right? So when we talk about loneliness being chronic, what we mean is that it's always with us, or that it's with us more often than it isn't. In the same way that we can think about having a chronic illness versus having an episodic one, right? A flu is an episodic illness. You have it now, but you're going to get over it. Diabetes is a chronic illness. Once you have it, you have it. And for a lot of people, loneliness becomes a chronic problem. It almost becomes a part of their experience as human beings that they sort of take with them and carry around with them. And it becomes problematic for a number of reasons, not least of which is that many of us are not particularly good at coping with it. So we cope with a lot of things in our lives, right? We cope with health problems. We cope with money problems. We cope with financial or relational problems. And coping, of course, is our strategy for managing that problem, for minimizing its negative effects on us. I feel this problem and I'm motivated to do something about it to reduce its negative impact on me. That's what we talk about when we talk about coping. The problem with loneliness is that so many people, when they are chronically lonely, cope with that loneliness using behaviors that are maladaptive, that are very self-destructive. What I mean by that is that even if it makes you feel less lonely, it causes new problems on top of your loneliness. And I've listed some of the more common maladaptive coping strategies here. The one at the top of the list may surprise you, which is that people who feel chronically lonely often develop eating disorders as a result of that. Now, that may not seem obvious to us. Why, what would one thing have to do with another? Why would becoming anorexic or bulimic have any effect on our loneliness? But if you've ever known anyone who has gone through an eating disorder, one of the things that's often true about that is that the disorder almost becomes like an entity. It's almost like a friend to people who are going through it. So even if I don't have anyone else on my life to count on, I can count on my bulimia. I can count on my anorexia. That may seem strange to say, but if you're going through it, it becomes almost like a partner. And in a way, people who are in the grip of that will say that at least that's something that's with me, that's familiar, I can count on. And that's the way it serves as a way to cope with loneliness, even though it's very self-destructive in the process. Another example is I'm going to go online or I'm going to go on an app and I'm going to create, anonymous sexual hookups. I'm going to go meet somebody that I don't know and have sex with them, right? Now, you don't have to be lonely to do that, right? But people who are chronically lonely, that's another way of coping with it, because at least for a few minutes, I can interact with somebody in a very intimate way, in a very physical way. I'm not alone. Even if I don't know their name, I don't know anything about them, there's no emotional connection, but at least it's a few minutes to escape my loneliness. And that's why it can be a coping mechanism. Not a good one, but a common one. Gambling addiction is another great example. When people get addicted to something like gambling, and it happens with substance addiction as well, one of the reasons that those behaviors feel good to us is that they elevate in our brains a chemical called dopamine. When you become addicted to coffee, when you become addicted to chocolate, any number of substances, what you're really becoming addicted to is the dopamine rush that those substances, or in this case, that behavior gives you. And once again, this can be a way not to change my loneliness, not to solve that problem, but to escape it, at least for the time being, in the same way that an anonymous sexual encounter allows me to do that. At least it's something that feels good in the short term, and it's a way to escape the pain of my loneliness. Drug and alcohol abuse, of course, are very common as ways of coping. This is not an exhaustive list, and maybe you cope with loneliness in ways that are that are less destructive, and that's a very good thing. But these are not at all uncommon as ways that people try to manage the pain of chronic loneliness, especially when it's very intense. The other reason that loneliness is such a big problem and that we really have come to think of it as a health problem is that so many other genuine health problems go along with it. So that if you feel chronically lonely, you are at elevated risk of some of these health conditions, some of these health problems. Chronic pain, for one. People who report a high degree of chronic loneliness also report a high degree of chronic pain that has no other, at least obvious, organic cause. It's not caused by injury, it's not caused by illness, it's caused by failing to meet that very fundamental human need that they have. Sleep disorders, I talked about when I was a college freshman, and it was tough to sleep, at least that first semester. So disordered sleeping, substance abuse, very common for chronic loneliness, as we talked about before. Lack of exercise is an interesting one. You know, you would think that if you were chronically lonely, you would automatically be motivated to put yourself out there, right? If I'm lonely, you might reason, well, that's stemming from my lack of social connection. Well, maybe it seems obvious to me that would motivate me to get out and make social connections, to engage in what we as researchers call approach behaviors. I'm hungry, so I'm going to eat. I'm tired, so I'm going to sleep. I'm lonely, so I'm going to go out and meet people. That seems very logical. But if you've ever been in the grip of chronic loneliness, you know that often the motivation is just the opposite. I don't want to get out and meet people. I want to withdraw into myself. It's a very similar experience that happens with depression, right? If you've ever been in the grip of depression or know somebody who has, you know that one of the most common symptoms of that is a tendency to withdraw into ourselves. The last thing I want to do is to go out and be around other people. And one effect of that is that I don't go to the gym, or I don't go out running, or I don't put myself in situations where encountering other people is likely. And so a lack of exercise is a health problem that goes along with chronic loneliness. Consumption of fat is also an interesting one. It's not that lonely people eat more fat. It's that they consume a higher percentage of their daily calories in the form of fat, which of course is very damaging to their cardiovascular health. And both that and a lack of exercise can stem from a very problematic self-message that we give ourselves when we're lonely or depressed, which is, why bother? I don't have anybody to be healthy for. So why bother exercising? Why bother eating healthy? That's not a good message. It's not a constructive message, but it's a very common message. And you know, just from your own experience, if nothing else, that the things we say to ourselves have consequences. The things we say to ourselves become a part of our reality. And for chronically lonely people, that's a part of their reality. Certainly the biggest problem, the most severe problem associated with loneliness is an increased risk of suicide. Once again, that stems from that same self-message, why bother? Why bother taking care of myself? Why bother continuing to live? Who will miss me if I'm gone? These are the things that people who attempt suicide, or even who just think about it, the term for that is suicide ideation. If I'm just even thinking about what that would be like to do, these are the kinds of self-messages that are very common for people in that situation, the belief that nobody would miss me if I were gone. All right, well, that sounds like loneliness to me. So I think we can make the claim that loneliness is more than just a nuisance, right? It's more than just one of those things that we deal with in our lives. It's more serious than that. It's a more serious problem. I experienced it in a very minor way, in a very sort of low-grade level when I was a freshman in college, and I hope that that has been your experience too, if loneliness is something that you've gone through. But one of the other things we can say about it is that it's on the rise. There's a government agency, and I can't remember which, that every few years does a survey of American adults. And one of the questions that they ask every time is, do you have somebody in your life, at least one person, that you feel like you can talk to? Is there somebody in your life you can share good news with, or share bad news with, or sit and talk about the problems, or sit and talk about your dreams? Or do you have anybody in your life that you can really talk to? And the percentage of American adults who answers that question, no, I have nobody in my life to talk to, is going up and up and up every time they ask the question. So we know that more and more of us are feeling lonely these days. Is your technology to blame? Is it Facebook's fault? Is it your smartphone's fault? Right? Maybe it's Siri's fault. Who knows? We're going to explore that question now because, of course, it's very easy to point the finger at technology and say that because loneliness is on the rise, and of course we know that technology use is on the rise, that one is obviously causing the other. So is technology to blame? I want to start this question by making the observation that we have a very long-standing tendency to blame technology for what's wrong in our society, right? It's an easy target. And as technology becomes a bigger and bigger part of our daily lives, it becomes an easier and easier target. We have a long-standing tendency, and when I say long-standing, I really mean it goes back many, many, many decades. One example is the invention of the telephone. When the telephone was brand new technology, you may or may not know this, there was a bit of an outrage, there was a bit of an outcry in the media that this new technology, this new gadget that we have called the telephone, is going to be the destroyer of families, is going to be the end of civilization as we know it. One article went so far as to call it an instrument of the devil, right? It was an outcry because the idea was that if people have access to a telephone, if you can pick up a receiver and dial a number, you used to have to dial, by the way. Some of you don't know that, but if you can pick up a phone and you can dial somebody else, then who's going to go see their family anymore? Who's ever going to sit down with somebody else face to face? This is going to be the end of civilization as we know it. Does that sound familiar? Does that argument or outcry? It should, if it doesn't. But it's been with us for some time. Our tendency to blame technology for what's wrong with us socially has been around in our culture for decades. And of course, we know in retrospect, we know with the benefit of hindsight, that the telephone did not actually destroy relationships, right? It did not actually cause your grandparents or your great-grandparents to never go see each other anymore. If it did, you wouldn't be sitting here, right? So we knew that it was a false alarm back then. Is it a false alarm now? It's very easy, as I said, to blame social media for social disconnected for a number of reasons. Number one, they're both on the rise. So more and more people are using social media and using communication technology. More and more people are feeling lonely. On one hand, that seems like a kind of a duh moment. Well, obviously, since they're related, one must be causing the other, right? It's very easy to think that. Smartphones demand our social attention. Are any of you sitting in the audience today feeling a little tiny bit anxious right now? Because you can't look at your phone? It's okay to admit it, right? It's fine. Your cell phone, your technology, those affordances that you have in your life that are meant to help us connect with each other more, they're kind of a time suck, aren't they? They're kind of an attention grabber. Have you ever sat across from somebody in a conversation while you've been talking to them and in the middle of your conversation this happens? Right? I mean, hang on. Does that feel familiar? You're giggling, right? So I know you've been through that. In the middle of a conversation, in the middle of an interaction, when somebody takes their attention away from you and gives it to a cell phone, gives it to a text message, gives it to a phone call. You know, it's like walking into a business, right? And you're at the counter and the person is helping you, and then suddenly their phone rings and now you're not the priority anymore. Somebody who called gets attention while you, who took the time to go down to that business, are being ignored, right? That's the way technology works. That's the way smartphones and other forms of communication technology demand our attention and our emotional energy. There's a study that I write about in the Loneliness book which says that we touch our cell phones more than we touch each other. Some of you are nodding, so that must be true in your own life as well. For most of us, that's the thing, that's the entity that we connect with the most, that we interact with the most, that maybe we feel the most connected with. So for all of these reasons, it makes sense to ask ourselves, is technology to blame? Is it the reason that we're lonely? And my response to that is this, that blaming loneliness on your smartphone is a little bit like blaming a bank robbery on the getaway car. That was the best car I could find as a getaway car, by the way. It doesn't really look like one, but I don't really know what a getaway car looks like, so what do I mean by this observation? Well, that car is a tool, right? That car is a piece of equipment. That car does not have a brain and does not have decision-making ability to put a plan into action. It's a piece of equipment. It's a tool that can be used as part of a plan, in this case, a plan to rob a bank, but it no more causes that bank robbery than the gun, or than the lock on the front door, or the security alarm that doesn't go off, or that bulletproof glass, or the ATM, or any other piece of equipment involved in that process. Right? That plan comes about as a series of decisions. And equipment doesn't have the ability to make decisions. We do. Right? We choose to use, in this case, that piece of technology to execute a plan to rob a bank. So do we blame it on the car? Well, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense when we put it that way, does it? So let's come back then to the observation about communication technology. And just like a getaway car, your smartphone or your computer or your iPad or your, watch that keeps buzzing every 10 minutes with a new text message, these are all tools. And like with any other tool that we engage in the process of executing a plan, what matters to us isn't whether we use it, it's how we use it. What are we using that tool for? The second point is important. As a communication teacher, one of the questions that I often get, usually from older adults, older than me especially, is, don't you find that these days your students just really don't know how to communicate anymore? Don't you find that to be the case? Aren't your students kind of like communication idiots these days? Because they're always on their phones and they're always on their iPads and they're always on their computers and they never look at you and they never talk and blah, 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 right? You've heard this argument before. I get this question often from people who want to know, what's it like to try to teach communication to students who can't communicate? And in response to that question, I used to be really glib about it and say, oh yeah, they never pay attention, they're always on their smartphones. But when I really think about it, my genuine answer to that question is no, it's not at all the case that students don't know how to communicate anymore. They may communicate differently than I did when I was their age or even than I do now. But my students and you all have proficiencies in communication that go far beyond what I'm capable of doing, or at least what I'm exercised in doing. Are you a better communicator than I am? Are you a worse communicator? Well, that's an individual level question. But as a group, I don't at all agree with the argument that, kids today, students today, they don't know how to communicate. I don't think that's true at all. I think that in many ways, you communicate and keep social connection much better than people in generations ahead of you. And that's what I mean when I say that technology has been a boon. It's been a positive force for communication and for loneliness, for relationships in many, many ways. How many of you have had the experience of feeling lonely, even if it's just in a moment, even if it's just in a particular context, and you used your communication technology to remedy that? I'm missing my family. I'm missing my friends. I'm going to send a text message. I'm going to hop onto Skype. I'm going to send an instant message and for at least a moment, reconnect with that relationship. I didn't have that option when I was a college student, right? I didn't have a cell phone. There was no internet back then. I couldn't hop on Skype when I was a freshman. I didn't have those abilities when I was new to school and feeling lonely because of that, and you do. So if anything, I think communication technology can be used to overcome loneliness, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is used that way. It's been a boon for communication in many, many ways. However, it always comes down to the decisions that we make and the way that we use it. So what can we do? What can all of us do as consumers of communication technology? Well, one is to acknowledge that it can be an issue for us when it comes to the quality of our relationships. We often talk about the dangers of driving while texting, but we don't often think about the dangers of trying to carry on a relationship while texting is always in the foreground, or the cell phone can go off any minute. When that's a constant part of our lives, when cell phone use and communication technology are chronic in the way that they are, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad for relationships, but they do have an effect, positive or negative. The solution to the problem isn't to stop using technology, right? It's not to go on a cell phone fast. Maybe just a little diet, like as you're doing right now. It's to make smarter decisions about the way that we use those tools in our lives. So what does that mean in a practical sense? Number one on that list is awareness. So I was with somebody recently, and we were in the middle of, I wouldn't say a heavy conversation, but I was telling a story and I was relating something that was very meaningful to me. And right in the middle of my story, his cell phone rang, and he just, without even thinking, he picked it up and carried on a whole 15-minute conversation before even getting back to me. And then by that point, he'd sort of forgotten that I was in the middle of telling him a story. An absolute lack of awareness as to how that would affect me. And how do you think it affected me? Hurt my feelings, right? Now, I said that to him after he hung up the phone. I said, I was in the middle of telling you something that was really important to me, that was meaningful to me. And it hurt my feelings that you immediately, when there was something else to catch your attention, stole your attention from me and gave it to your phone. And that surprised him because he was not aware, right? He wasn't thinking about the effect that would have on me, about how that would come across. He was not being conscientious by putting himself in my position instead of in his own. We all have a natural tendency to think about ourselves first. That's natural. That's normal. But it's not necessarily a good thing for relationships. So I asked him to think about, if I had done that to him, how might that have hit him? How might that have come across? That increases his conscientiousness. It increases his awareness. And both of those things can lead us then to focus not just on the efficiency of our conversations, which something like a smartphone can greatly enhance. That's why it's such a great communication tool, because it's so efficient. But efficiency isn't the only thing that matters to us. What also matters to us is the quality. And let me tell you briefly about a very interesting study done just a couple of years ago. In this particular study, they placed people together in conversations, sitting around a table, just like you would if you went to lunch with somebody. And in about half those conversations, one of the people in the conversation took out their cell phone, like most of us do, and just put it on the table. right? When I sit down to lunch, I'll take my phone out, I'll take my keys out, maybe just set them on the table so that they're not in my pocket. Now, the cell phone never went off. It never rang. It never rang. It never buzzed. It didn't do anything. It was just sitting there like an inanimate object. But at the end of that study, when people were asked, well, what was the quality of your conversation? There was a systematic difference. If a cell phone was even visible, people rated the quality of their conversation as lower. We did not have as good of a talk. Even if the cell phone never went off, it was just there. It was just visible. Why? Because it's a reminder that at any moment, it may go off. It may steal this other person's focus and attention away from me. And just being reminded of that, just because it's sitting there, that decreased the quality of the conversation. Now, that's not something that I would necessarily have thought of. I mean, I don't think about that when I just routinely take it out and put it on the table. But that goes back to awareness. That goes back to being conscientious. And that's a really small thing. I mean, that's a really small piece of advice that you can put into practice the next time you sit down with somebody. If you care at all about that person, or if you care at all about that conversation, keep your phone in your pocket. Keep it in your bag or in your purse. You don't need it sitting out there. And if you do, if you're expecting an important call, if you're expecting a text message with important information, my advice is to let the other person know that ahead of time. Just so you know, I'm expecting a very important call. This is what my friend said to me after I ragged on him for taking the call in the middle of our conversation. He said, well, I was expecting that call. I said, yeah, but you could have told me that. And then it wouldn't have hurt my feelings so badly. I can be upfront about if I'm expecting an important piece of news, and if the phone rings, I'm going to have to take it, right? That sets a different expectation for the quality of that conversation. These are minor things. These are easy little tidbits that we can all put into place. But at least according to the research, they can have an important effect on the quality of the connections that we have with those people sitting across from us. So my message to you is not that your cell phone is to blame for everything that's wrong in your relationships. It actually can be something very positive for your ability to stay in touch with people and to share information and to feel a sense of connection in those moments of loneliness. It can be a very good thing for us. It all comes down to the decisions that we make. And so I know the moment this session's over, you're all going to whip out your cell phones and see what you missed for the last 40 minutes. And I get that. That's fine. That's who we are these days. But in that, don't necessarily disregard the power of low-tech communication. Don't disregard the value of sitting across from somebody. And as you think about the anxiety maybe that you're feeling when your cell phone's put away, or how you feel when you're on an airplane and you have to turn it off altogether, right? I mean, what am I going to miss in an hour and a half? And as soon, you've been on those flights where as soon as the wheels hit the ground, everybody's, they're back online. Whew, thank God, right? What did I miss? Instead of focusing only on the anxiety of that situation and what you missed, ask yourself also, what did I gain? What was good about that time away from my phone? What did it allow me to do? What did it allow me to think about? Or how did it allow me to connect with other people in a way that I couldn't have otherwise? That's that low tech. That's that face-to-face. That's who we are as human beings. Yes, we're technology users, but we're also interpersonal creatures. So in our rush to see what we missed or get back online, my advice is not to forget that, is not to focus only on what we missed, but also on what we gained. And with that, I will thank you. We have just a couple of minutes before we're going to do some announcements, and then you can head out of here. Questions or comments in that couple of minutes? Anything at all? Yes, sir. Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is Even though there are a lot of health problems that go with loneliness, is it possible to deal with loneliness in a healthy way? And the answer is absolutely yes, right? Like with any other stressful event that we go through in our lives, a health crisis, a relationship crisis, there are constructive ways to cope with it, and then there are very destructive ways. And just because there are so many problems that tend to go along with loneliness, that doesn't at all mean that they have to. It's entirely possible for all of us, when we experience stressful things in our lives, to learn better coping strategies. And the better we can cope with something like loneliness, the less likely we are to suffer from the kinds of health problems that tend to go with it. But that's a lesson, right? That's something that we have to actively engage ourselves in figuring out. And that's why loneliness is so problematic, because so many of us don't do that. It's entirely possible, but it requires being proactive in a way that many of us simply are not. Yes. Right. I am one of those people, believe it or not. Yeah. You know, when you're standing in front of a large audience with a microphone, you don't necessarily come across as somebody who's highly introverted. But I am, so I get that. And I think that, like with any other personality characteristic, right? Some of us are more extroverted, some are more introverted, and our personalities vary one to another in many, many ways. It's a matter of figuring out for yourself what level of emotional and social connection you actually need with other people, right? I made this point earlier that we don't all need the same amount of food. We don't all need the same amount of sleep. We don't all need the same amount of social connection to others. Some of us are just loners, right? And we're perfectly happy being alone, maybe with just one other person or two other people that we're close to. And other people, highly extroverted people, get energized by that social connection, right? As an introvert, I get drained by it, right? After a big party, after being around a lot of people, after this, like I need a little downtime to recharge. And so it doesn't necessarily mean I'm lonely, right? It's just a different set point for me. And when it comes to dealing with your own social needs and emotional needs, it's a matter of knowing yourself. It's a matter of knowing, because of who I am, because of what my personality is, these are situations that are likely to make me feel lonely, and these are ones that aren't. So a highly extroverted person might find the downtime that you and I need to be very lonely, to feel they may feel very disconnected during that time. But for me, it's quite the opposite. You're absolutely right about that. One more question. Yes? Absolutely. Yeah. Question is, how do you deal with people whose culture or maybe mental capabilities give them a different way of interacting with others? And that's a complicated question. I think I would say that once again, like with loneliness and technology, it comes back fundamentally to a level of awareness. So when I have had students in my classes who've been autistic or on the autism spectrum, or from cultures that are much more low contact than we are, I can't do anything to help those students if I'm not fundamentally aware of the fact that they're going to orient themselves to me a little bit differently than some of my other students. And so I think awareness is the important first step, and that will lead most of us then to want to educate ourselves. So what does it mean then to have a student on the autism spectrum? Or what does it mean to have a student whose culture is very low contact? What can I do as an instructor? Or what can I do as a friend, right? Or as a neighbor to connect with that person in a way that's going to be meaningful to them? And not necessarily presuming that the way that it makes sense or feels comfortable for me to do is going to be received in quite as positive a way to them, because of course you know that that's not the case at all. So awareness and then education in the specifics, I think are really, really important first steps in that problem. It's a great question. I'm now going to turn the mic back over for some announcements, but I really, really want to thank you for your time. This has been a true delight for me to be here.
I'm on top of the world, hey. I'm on top of the world, hey. Been waiting on this for a while now, paying my dues to the dirt. I've been waiting to slide, hey. Been holding it in for a while, hey. Take you with me if I can. Been dreaming of this since a child. I'm on top of the world. I've tried to cut these corners, try to take the easy way out. I kept on falling short of something. I could have gave up then, but then again I couldn't have, 'cause I've traveled all this way for something. I take it in but don't look down, 'cause I'm on top of the world, hey. I'm on top of the world, hey. Been waiting on this for a while now, paying my dues to the dirt. I've been waiting to slide, hey. Been holding it in for a while, hey. Take you with me if I can. Been dreaming of this since a child. I'm on top of the world.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I'm on top of the world, hey. I'm on top of the world, hey. Been waiting on this for a while now, paying my dues to the dirt. I've been waiting to smile, hey. Been holding it in for a while, hey. Take you with me if I can. Been dreaming of this since a child. And I know it's hard when you're falling down, and it's a long way up, and you make you round, but get up now, get up now. And I know it's hard when you're falling down, and it's a long way up, and you make you round, but get up now, get up now. 'Cause I'm on top of the world, hey. I'm on top of the world, hey. Waiting on this for a while now, paying my dues to the earth. I've been waiting this long, hey. Been holding it for a while, hey. Take you with me if I can. Dreaming of this to be ours. And I know it's hard when you're falling down, and it's a long way up, and you make you round, but get up now, get up now. And I know it's hard when you're falling down, and it's a long way up, and you make you round, but get up now, get up now. 'Cause I'm on top of the world, hey. I'm on top of the world, hey. Waiting on this for a while now, paying my dues to the earth. I've been waiting this long, hey. Been holding it for a while, hey. Take you with me if I can. Dreaming of this to be ours. I'm on top of the world. If you love somebody, better tell them why they're here, 'cause they just may run away from you. You'll never know quite when, well, then again it just depends on how long the time is left for you. I've had the highest mountains, I've had the deepest river. You can have it all, but now keep moving. I'll take it in, but don't look down, 'cause I'm on top